Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 164. And my guest in this episode is Emil Pienaar. And I found Emil online and was reading a little bit about him, and I thought, well, he would be a good guest for me to expand the conversation. And by that I mean, I don't get too many people of faith on my show, and I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity here. And so you'll see that in the conversation, and it was a fulfilling conversation for me in that regard to speak with Emil, learn about his practice of his faith, also his openness to interfaith dialogue, and to have a good broad view of life. And we discuss, in that sense, we talk to meaning and even suffering, mental health, things like that. So it's just a good, enriching conversation. I'm really grateful to Emil for coming on and being a guest. And I hope you enjoy the conversation, or hope there's a good takeaway for you. And I, as always, appreciate your presence and your listening to these conversations. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome Emil Pienaar to the IdeaCast interview series. And I say this sometimes that, I usually have pre-meets with my guests, just so that we can get on a kind of wavelength together and figure out what we want to talk about. And we did. Emil and I had a really nice flowy conversation, and I think that will repeat itself here, and we may gloss over some of the things we talked about in the previous conversation. So let's see where it goes. Emil, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Justin, and it's once again a pleasure to catch up with you.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, and welcome to the audience as well. And I'm sure, as the audience can detect, Emil has a very thick Italian accent. So we're going to ask him, where is he right now? Where is he from? Yeah. Of course, I'm being facetious. When I was a kid, my last name is McSweeney, Irish, and so the other Irish that would talk to you, oh, that's a fine Italian name you've got there. So anyway, Emil, you have a non-American, Western Hemisphere accent. So we are curious. I know, but I'll ask you to perhaps share a little of your history, a little of your background, and that'll help segue us into what I know will be a nice, as we said a moment ago, a nice jazz conversation where we're just going to play our instruments and coordinate them into a flow state. So,
yeah, that sounds good. No, my background is a little bit of a mixed bag. I'm South African born, New Zealand raised, and now I live in Australia. So pretty much all three is Southern Hemisphere countries. And they are a bit of a mix. I would say New Zealand and Australian are cousins, more like it. Our accent slightly differs, but people still detect the South African in my accent as well as the Kiwi. And okay. I actually had one guy say to me, once when I was at a hardware store over here, he said to me, "Are you South African born in New Zealand raised?" It was the first person to ever pick it up. And turns out he's actually a linguist, but he's now, as a retiree, works in the hardware store. And so he goes, I could pick up accents a mile away. So I was just like, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, so a bit of my background, I lived in South Africa till I was 12. My first language still to this day is Afrikaans. I speak it to my wife and my 3 children. And my wife is also South African born, New Zealand raised. And I met her in New Zealand.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and it was literally like it goes to me, you're South African, she's South African, talk.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And 45 minutes later, he actually said to me, when's the wedding, bro? So,
oh, God. No pressure, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
He saw that we gelled straight away. What I do is, so just like outside of that, I'm a Christian. I did a bachelor's in theology. And while I was doing my bachelor's in theology, I got a part-time job as a support worker. And that's sort of what led me into mental health, disabilities, and corrections, working in that sphere. And once I finished my degree, I kind of thought, you know what, maybe I should do a little bit more study, a bit more on the healthcare side. So I became a nurse as well. And while doing nursing, realized I don't really like it very much. I finished it, but then I went straight into management and healthcare. So I got myself a graduate certificate in management as well. And so 3 tertiary qualifications. And, but sort of my whole passion has always been working with people and working cross-cultural. So I did missionary work in the Amazon jungle as well. I've gone 3 times. And while there, I also picked up Spanish while I was there. And I always say that I could speak 5 languages conversationally, but it's because 3 I learned, but 2 of the others are sort of my cheat codes, I would say. Because Spanish and Portuguese is quite close to each other. You just have to figure out the nuances, especially Brazilian Portuguese to Peruvian Spanish. And then Dutch and Afrikaans, I just have to change my Afrikaans accent, and then I can sound Dutch as well. So, so that's sort of how I cheat to know more languages than I actually do. So.
Right. You get to the root of it, and then you can radiate, in a direction, and have people. I've heard that about Peruvian. The job I have, my station supervisor is from Honduras. She's married to a Peruvian, and she speaks Central American Spanish, but she's gone to Peru, and it's like, something a little different going on there, and maybe that is that Portuguese influence in some parts, maybe, because she said, yeah, she was there, and some of the dialects, and I find that too, because I learned Central American and Mexican Spanish, which, you can say what you want about Mexico, but I was in Puerto Rico recently. I can speak like at a 3-year-old level of Spanish. I don't conjugate very well, but I can communicate. But listening, my ear was not tuned to Puerto Rican Spanish at all. And so it just went, whew. And I'd been in Costa Rica recently, and that was much easier. I picked up what they were saying. I only get about 60% of what they're saying. So anyway, I understand how each region can vary, and it can be easier, or it can be, dicey. So,
well, it's interesting because when I was on the border of Brazil and Peru, they sort of spoke if I can use the term, pidgin type of mix of Portuguese and Spanish. And my wife she learned Spanish through a person from Spain at her university. And so her Spanish is way more formal than what mine would be. And so when we were there on the border, her and I, she's like, I don't understand a word they're saying. But I was conversing just fine because that's where I learned. So
yeah, you did fine. And I empathize with her because I went to Spain once and I didn't understand a damn thing they were saying. And my mother went to high school in Madrid, and she grew up in Venezuela, and she spoke fluent Spanish, and she's a snob, so she speaks the Castilian Spanish from Spain. But I got over there, and there's like Corsican, and there's there's like 3 dialects, and the northern Basque country is all, some other weird romantic language. I was lost, even reading the signs. I thought I went over there, I thought, well, this was 30 years ago. I thought, I'll speak a little Spanish, and I had better luck with French, which I speak no French at all. And the ear, I don't have. Anyway, yeah. I love language. I think it's so beautiful that there's variation. There's, a lot of language out there in the world, and it all does the same thing. And it's just so neat. And to hear other languages is fascinating too, even if you don't speak it. Like I had a customer years ago when I had a landscape business, and she was from Colombia. Her husband was from somewhere else. And she said to me one time, she's a cute little 80-year-old woman, and she says, Spanish is what you speak to your child. German is what you speak to your dog. And she goes, French is what you speak to your lover. And I laughed. I was like, you're so cute. And I totally agree, right? Like, and I wouldn't go that far with German. I like German. My dad spoke German, but she just was like, German is what. But French is a beautiful language, Somebody could be absolutely berating you in French, and you're just like, wow, that is a beautiful language.
Well, the funny thing with my name, Emil André Pienaar, is it's a full French name, and my family comes from the generations known as the Huguenots, which is from France.
Yep.
During the Reformation period. But ask me to speak French, it's like I could probably do Je suis Emil, parlez-vous français, and that's as far as it goes.
Voulez-vous? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if I could snap my fingers and get a wish, it would be to speak French and to know French, because it, again, is such a beautiful language. Just to hear it being spoken is so easy on the ears, and it, I think, especially in the northeast of France, it's like you were saying with Brazil and Peru, that it gets fuzzy with German and the Germanic, and so that it's not. It's not as much a romantic language as, say, Italian or which is closer to vulgar Latin, and Portuguese is, sometimes I hear Portuguese and it sounds like they're speaking Russian to me. They're so fast with it. It has that almost not what's the Gallic or Slavic or whatever's going on with that part of the language tree, or it's actually I think it's its own unique language tree. But anyway, Portuguese is very alien to me. I'm like, whoa. And then if you read it, you get it. You see the same similar structure or constituency that you might in Spanish, I guess. But it's different. Yeah. So anyway, language, it's beautiful. So you are a man of the world. You've been around, and I love that the linguist picked up. I picked up South African when I first started listening to you, and then I said, well, he obviously integrated his either Aussie accent or the Kiwi accent into it, and because as I understand, like New Zealand, it's to me it's a higher register and maybe a little more nasally. Like in the United States, people from the Midwest are more nasally. It's not an insult, it's just that the way they pronounce things is more up at the upper palate or the nasal, and that's what I kind of think about New Zealand versus Australian. But again, and maybe even Tasmania, they're a little different. But I detected your South African, but I wouldn't know how to parse the New Zealand and the Australian. And
for me, I would say differences. At least what I've seen is when I was in South Africa, you learn to enunciate everything. So Afrikaans, English, everything you enunciate. So you speak outwards when you're talking to people. I actually have a friend that's a comedian, and he's a Kiwi comedian, and he actually does accents obviously as part of his spiel. And I asked him, like, when we were just having coffee, can you do the South African accent? He's like, I'm going to leave that one for when you actually come to one of my shows. So I got to a show and he did the South African, and it was all about using facial expressions. Okay. And then he said, but the Kiwi, we're kind of lazy. We just kind of talk like this. And then he said, but the Australian, they just shorten everything. So instead of saying Australia, they'd say Australia. Okay. But instead of saying department store, they'd go depot. Or instead of avocado, avo, But they'll also talk about the afternoon as the avo, So.
Okay. Just get right to the point and abbreviate. That's funny.
Yeah. That's funny. Even their Salvation Army store is called Salvos. Like, that's how it's spelled. Yeah.
Which is traditionally like artillery shells coming in. So.
Yeah.
Salvos, no. Yeah. No, we're going, I love thrift shopping. Yeah, I love the Salvation Army. Yeah, salvos. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Isn't that funny what we do with language once we have a language that, like, Americans are getting that way too. I notice, and I'm not trying to be too generational here because my generation did it, but everything is shorthand, or it's letters now. Everything's alphabet soup, like OMGs and LOLs and all these other things that I'll never decipher. But you almost pick it up whether you like it or not. You can kind of intuit what they're saying with 6 letters, strung together. But yeah, I guess it's probably a reflection of this informational age that we find ourselves in, where everything is rapid fire, immediacy, very little time for frivolity and formality and all that kind of thing, which in a way I tend to reject. I like being slow, like the Australian, or the New Zealander is a little slower, and take our time. Yeah, so maybe that's the Southeast in me, because in the United States, the Southerners are always picked on, for being kind of slow and talking like this. Howdy, y'all. So, there's a stereotype that comes with that. So, but anyway, let's open up some conversation about the work you do? Because when you talk about working with imprisoned people or people with, I believe you were doing some counseling with people who obviously are, have been incarcerated, but are maybe perhaps dealing with mental health issues. So can you share some of that and the work that you do and the connections you make with people and how that affects you and them? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's open some of that up.
So first off, like 15 years in healthcare now. So like I've done 15 years, 12 years of that. It's been mental health, addiction, disability, correction. And the last 3 years has been aged care. So it's a mixture. So like with the elderly, working with them. But I think they all help out because I've actually had the privilege of working with most generations now. So in the case with when I was working in corrections, we worked with these guys that were offenders. So they became offenders, youth offenders. So before they were 17, a lot of them committed crimes. And some of these crimes would be towards offending against another human being, and so on. And in that, when you read their history, in their history, they went through the same kind of abuse. So there was this natural progression where a person received that abuse, and then all of a sudden they would then do the same abuse because their mind is telling them that's the direction they have to go. It's a certain trauma. Now, obviously, it's not everyone that receives abuse that becomes abusers or anything, but at the very least, you can have a look and you can see that there can be a correlation. Not necessarily a causation, but a correlation between those two. And I think my favorite story of when we actually saw someone become better and go further was when we saw that anytime he spoke to him, he spoke about not having a purpose, not being able to find a job because of his past. And even though it happened before he was 17, anytime he has to disclose that he's done these things. And so because of that, he's like, I'll never find a job. I'll never be able to do that. And then we started looking at ways, how can he? Because I like the term rather than I can't or this isn't for me, is I asked the question, how can I? So the first step was he needed to build some trust. So we got him into a carpentry certificate with, I think in America you would call them community college, but or trade school. In New Zealand it was a polytech. So we got him doing that carpentry certificate, which usually takes a year. It took him 2 years, but he completed it. Then once he completed it, he graduated. So there was this sense of achievement in his life. And so I was at the graduation and he was very stoked with this achievement. And then when he went out from under our care, he actually was real privileged to get a job for 15 hours a week pushing a trolley at a supermarket.
Okay.
And this was 2019. So 2019, this happened. He starts pushing a trolley. And he does it in the scorching heat, rain, everything. He does it in all that. And then COVID hits. Everybody in the supermarkets counts it now as essential workers.
Oh.
Now imagine, we can talk about the negatives of what happened during that time, but think about the positive that happens to a person that goes, I have no purpose, I can't do anything, now being told, you are essential. That flips the brain around totally. Because now he's essential, so he starts pushing the trolley, and he pushes it with purpose. They come to him and they go, you're not immune compromised, so could you do 40 hours a week? Because a lot of people had to take, yes, I can do 40 hours a week. Now he works 9 to 5, 5 days a week. He does his work and goes home, lives with his brother that gave him an apartment above the garage, and he goes home, plays his PlayStation, next day goes to work. And he doesn't cause any trouble, and he's now a productive member of society.
Mm.
We're now 2026. He still works at the same place, still pushes the same trolleys. They asked him whether he wanted to go inside and start working in the deli areas and learning the other parts of the supermarket. And he said no. He said, here, I am essential. And now he trains others to do that job as well.
Okay.
Now,
Very nice.
say what you want about a job like that. I don't care. I think if you have a job and you're a productive member of society, brilliant.
Yeah.
Now he works, and he's been working there for almost 7 years now, still doing the same job, loving his job, feeling essential.
I love
Now
it.
imagine
I
what that
absolutely
does
love it.
to a person that
Yeah.
was told you're nothing. You cannot amount to anything.
Hmm.
And it's finding those little dots and connecting those little dots to add value to a person's life.
Hmm.
And so that's to this day is one of my favorite stories.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very inspirational because he did start at like ground floor zero. Most of us are advantaged to not have gone through what he went through, and it's still difficult and it's still obviously a struggle. But to start at that mental place of saying, nobody's going to hire me. I have a background. I have what he would consider a blemish, and by society's standards it was. But if he did his penitence and he did his correctional obligations, then there should be some means for him to then elevate, and he did, and that's really nice. And it brought to mind that Viktor Frankl's will to meaning. Like, if a person has meaning in their life, they can overcome a lot. And this man found meaning in being the essential worker, being depended on to come through, and especially in adverse conditions. And the purpose that you mentioned, that there is a purpose to his getting up in the morning and making the effort to get there and do well, not just show up, but to do well. So that's awesome. That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. And that has to warm your heart too, right?
It does, because when I first started in that corrections front, it was a job that I got because my cousin was studying nursing, and he was working for the boss of this company, one of the other companies the boss owned as well. And he ended up saying to him, I need a worker at this new place. And the guy said, well, I don't want to pay double tax for working in different areas. So how about you just hire my cousin? So it was sort of like, I didn't have any experience in the matter, but it was who I knew. So so he got me the job. I didn't think much of it because I was like, I just want some money while I'm studying. And somehow that became my career, you see. So it's interesting how that happens, because I was training to be a minister, to stand in front of a church, preach and everything. And I still love that, and I still will go into that. But somehow this became my career. And I see it as God guiding my way and everything, and him actually guiding me on this path so that I could become a better minister. Because when I first got into this and I read sort of the rap sheet for what these guys have done, and I sit there and I'm like, seriously, these guys don't deserve another shot. These guys, and this is how my mind's working. Yeah. And then I had to go back to the place where, well, I'm a Christian, and Christians believe in forgive and moving forward. So how can I implement that into my job?
Yeah.
So in that's what helped me push forward, so that I'm like, well, I'm here now. Let's do this job, and let's do it to the best of our abilities. And so with that, I always try to find activities, things of meaning for these guys to do. One of the guys, I actually got into a rugby team. And many rugby teams would not take you, clubs and everything. But my church was running a social rugby team, and we were playing against the university. And I was part of that team. And so I mentioned what was going on with this guy that I was looking after. They said, yeah, bring him along, let him be part of our team. And so it's once again getting that team feel, finding things for these guys to do. that's what makes the change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so he played for a whole year for our rugby team, and we needed what you call a prop, which is one of the frontline guys that's really big.
Okay.
And he was a solid guy, so it was quite good having him in the team. And I make this little joke because I was support working while playing rugby, so I was
Mm-hmm.
technically being paid to play rugby. So I was like, I'm semi-professionals.
Add that to your list of
Yeah,
accomplishments, and you're like, oh, I
just a little
yeah,
tick.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Good for you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, technically, why not? And if you played
Yeah.
good, all the better, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we won't talk about that one.
Oh,
I'm
okay. Well, you played with heart. You played with
I,
intention. So,
I'm 5'8", and
uh,
most of the guys in my team is 6'1" to six foot
oh,
two. They're pretty
okay.
massive guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even my wife's 6'1", so I've got a really
Okay.
tall wife, and
Uh-huh.
her dad's 6'7". So like I've always been surrounded by all these really tall
Super
people.
tall people. Oh my God, that's funny. So, how's your neck? Is it okay?
Yeah, I make the joke that I'm the one that when I go kiss my wife, I get the leg pop, It's
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the romantic
Well, nothing
movies.
wrong with that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely, absolutely. Now you mentioned that your trajectory is bringing you into the ministry. Are you in in the completion of that aspiration and that intention? Are you thinking of uh, what's kind of aligning with what you've been doing, like doing maybe like more pastoral counseling, or are you thinking that you do want to have a pulpit and a congregation, or what do you see? What role do you see yourself, or a combination of those things?
I think it's a
What are you drawn to?
I think it's a combination, but also even while being an aged care, I look out for roles that sort of fits with what I want to do. So my father-in-law was quite fortunate to get a job as a business manager with a theological college called Reformed Theological College, which is here in
Okay.
Melbourne. And so he's one of the senior leaders there, but he never had a ministry background. And then when they moved over to Australia with us from New Zealand, he needed a job, and this job opened up for him. And that sort of broadened my horizons because I used to think with a theology degree, I could either become a theology lecturer
Hmm.
or I could become a pastor. So like one or the other. However, with this, it broadened my horizons to see that there's actually so much more I could do. And there's other jobs I can do. So like I could work for either Christian schools as a business manager, or I could, using my management background within aged care and everything, and transfer it. But also when you're running a church, you in a sense manage it as well. And but you manage volunteers and you manage people that hurt broken people that you want to actually also see go further in life. So
Hmm.
it's a mixed bag, but I think it fully relates with the work I've been doing. So
Nice, nice. So it'll be an easy, it's not even a transition, it's just sort of an easy next phase or next stage of your future horizon, what you find yourself doing. So that's nice. That's nice. And it's something that, you will fit into that role very easily, I believe. Just
mm.
from talking to you and listening to how you're seeing things and so forth. I have a pastor across the street from me. He's the pastor of it's called Evangelical Lutheran Church. So I don't know how that
Oh yeah.
distinguishes itself from the Lutheran Church. I went to a Lutheran daycare when I was a kid. Most fascinating thing when I was 6 years old or whatever is they had these bells, and you didn't ring them like this. You held them upside down, and they were padded. So they made the most beautiful sort of muted tones, like boom, boom. And I'm not doing it justice, but
Mm.
fried my mind when I was a kid because we're sitting there and we're like 6 years old and some hymns playing, and then just the teacher's like points to you and you go boom, and there's like five of us, and we're trying to stay in time or whatever, and but I'll never forget that. That's my takeaway from the Lutheran Church, is I got to play with a muted bell. So Now, do you see this in like the next 5 years, or are you like really like coming in for a landing on that right now? What's your timeline for,
Not
or
necessarily.
is it just like when the opportunity arises, then you'll fit that role?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably more like that because I still have a student debt that I'm paying off,
Mm-hmm.
but mine's almost paid off, and then I'm helping my wife pay hers off because my wife's a writer and she's got her honors in English,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm wanting her to get her books going,
Right.
um, so she's writing fiction novels at the moment. But in any case, so we're paying that off, and I feel being a good steward of your finances is getting rid of your debts, so
Mm-hmm.
that when I now go into the ministry, I'm completely debt free, because
Mm-hmm.
the Bible says, "Be no man's debtor." I
Mm-hmm.
find that a lot of times we'll say, "Except for," so
Yeah. A lot of exceptions. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No, but I
but
appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah,
Because it is
so.
a binding. It's something that really psychically, I think you feel much better when you're relieved of your debts and
mm,
honestly relieved of your debts. My wife and I have just a little bit on a truck that we're paying on. Everything else, the mortgage is paid, and we don't run up the credit card very often, and then we pay it off. So it's a good feeling, to feel that that's not hanging over you.
No, I can imagine, and so that's what I want to just get out of the way. And once that's out of the way,
Hmm.
I will pursue ministry a bit more actively.
Hmm.
But I always keep my ear to the ground, and I see what is out there. So like when I was still living in New Zealand, I was with a Pentecostal church over there, and I used to help. I was an intern with them, and I also helped the church once a month. That was just outside of out of Dunedin, like an hour outside. Where
Hmm.
once a month I would sort of give the pastors respite, so I would go do the preaching once a month on uh, pretty much for 5 years I was doing that.
Mm.
And so I loved it. I really enjoyed that. I've been fortunate to preach at other churches as well, but also so I really love that. But I would also like to take my kids on a missions trip as well, perhaps
Mm.
to the Amazon, because I want them to get a more broader perspective of what goes on in the world. And also one day when they make their own decisions, whether they're going to continue on it in faith, they've now had a broader experience. And it's not just dad going, you got to do what I do. You got to do it.
Mm.
But they get that broad
They feel
experience.
called. Yeah, they feel called to it. Now,
Mm.
here's a technical question. You live in Melbourne, and I know LATAM has a flight from Santiago, Chile to I think it's either Sydney or Melbourne. Do you take the southern route to get to South America, or do you go around the Pacific Rim? Like when you went on your various trips to the Amazon, did just this is a rando question. I like
No, no,
aviation
no.
and
It's a fair
flight.
question. So my first trip I did from New Zealand,
Uh-huh.
Aerolíneas Argentina. So I went
Okay,
straight over to Argentina, and
okay.
from Argentina I flew up to Peru,
Mm-hmm.
and then my sixth um, was Chile to Argentina,
Mm-hmm.
Chile to Peru, and then my third one was once again Chile to Peru. So it's a
Okay,
direct
okay.
flight from New Zealand to Chile. Yeah.
That's why I asked because I've seen that route and I'm like, I want to fly that someday. I was thinking I'll fly from Miami to somewhere in South America, doesn't matter, and then get to Santiago, Chile, and then hop on. For me, it was that LATAM flight that they had that goes right down, into the Austral regions, like right above the Antarctic, and then they end up either in New Zealand or I think there was one that went to I want to say it was Melbourne. But whoa, what a flight! Huh? That's got to take a while to get across that much water.
Well, for me, the part that was most annoying about my Argentina one at that stage was my mum always tries and gets the bargain. So she took the one. She helped me get the flight because I was just out of school for my first trip, and she's like, I went and talked to my flight agent and my travel agent, and they got you this flight. turned out that it said entertainment, but it was like one little TV in the middle of the
Oh,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
And
Everybody shares. Yeah.
yeah, and I did not speak Spanish at this stage, and the flight attendants were Spanish. So I hop on this flight, and the guy next to me goes to me, he goes, Tu hablas español? And I go, no. And then he just turns around, and I'm
Oh,
sitting there, and
oh man.
I have no books on me. I've got nothing, and I'm
Oh
super
man.
bored. And then they walk past, and they ask me, "Tu quieres carne y pasta?" And I don't know what carne means, so I
Right,
didn't know
right.
it meant meat.
Right at
So
that
I
time,
knew
yeah.
what pasta meant, and I'm like, "Well, I'll choose the thing that I know." And they give me the pasta, but the meat ended up looking a lot better, and the guy next to me chose the meat. And I almost wanted to say, no, no, I want what he had.
The meat, yeah, I want the carne.
Yeah,
Carne.
yes. So for me, I'm like, that was my only negative. So on my way
uh,
back, I actually had a book on me this
ah,
time, so
some
I held the book.
phrases and
But I also had and I don't suggest this to anybody, but I had a tranquilizer medication. Took
yeah,
that, and it knocked me out for 8 hours.
that's
And the
fine.
trip was like
I don't judge.
14. So
Yeah, I don't judge. Yeah, it has a purpose in that instance. It's not like you're getting high. You just need you got to kill some time. Might as well sleep a little bit. Yeah, I know people that
yeah,
have done
yes.
that.
But
My
yeah, and then I get back to New Zealand, and I'm straight into jury duty. So like
uh
my mum got this letter while I was away, and I opened the letter, and it says, if you don't want to do jury duty, you have to notify by the day before I arrived.
wow.
And then it says, if you don't attend, a fine for it. So I'm like, I pull it out, and I'm like, oh well, gives me 2 weeks to do something before I decide what I do next. So 2 weeks
Yeah,
into
right.
jury duty.
Oh my gosh. Welcome back, right?
Yeah.
Now sit and listen.
Yeah.
I've always gotten thrown off of jury duty. One time I wanted to be thrown off because my wife and I were going out on our first date, and I'm like, I don't want you stuck here for a week. Maybe she'll change her mind and she won't go out with me, And later she's like, I would have gone out with you if you'd gone on jury duty, but I got yelled at by the judge. It was kind of very uncomfortable, but I did what I had to do to get thrown out of that thing. And there was another time when I wanted to be on the jury, but I didn't answer I think the state's attorney asked me a question about defending yourself with a firearm, and they were putting a kid up on trial. This is before Florida enacted a stand your ground law, and this kid shot somebody, claimed it was in self-defense. Who knows? I didn't get to hear the evidence, but the state's attorney was like, "Do you believe in defending yourself with a firearm?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll kill somebody if I have to. I don't take any I don't enjoy it. I wouldn't enjoy it, but yeah, I'll shoot."
Yeah.
And they threw me out because they wanted somebody who was like, "How no, life is precious and all this stuff." And I'm like, not when somebody's trying to stab me to death or whatever.
Well, I don't disagree. Life is precious, but
Yeah,
sometimes you have to
you have
defend
to protect
yourself.
yourself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
we're not homicidal, but if you have to defend yourself, it's a clear line for me. If somebody threatens me or my wife in my home. Now, if I'm out on the street, I'm going to avoid it. There's that, here in America, they call it duty to retreat. I'll try my best to exercise that in public and not get into scraps or get into something I can't just walk away from. But if somebody comes into my house and they threaten me, then it's
it is
it's a done
different,
deal.
and I think sometimes a person on this side of the world then tries and tells other people how they're supposed to act and everything. And sometimes you've got to do what's right with your conscience.
Yeah.
And it's not about putting others down, but do what's right with your conscience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, with the jury duty, I tried to be thrown out. I used to wear this T-shirt just on my shirt. It said, Jesus, Satan's greatest nightmare. So I thought wearing this would get me sent off, I'm like, that maybe because the paraphernalia is showing so broadly.
You obviously have opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I don't get challenged, and I'm like, oh, okay. so,
That's
so
funny.
now
You
I'm
did.
stuck in jury duty for 2 weeks.
So much for the shirt. Nice try, right? And I'm sure the attorneys were like, "Oh, one of those guys." Yeah, right. Trying to
We
weasel
need at
out.
least one. We need at least one.
Right, right, right. What I'd like to do is you had shared with me indirectly a link to a YouTube video that you had a conversation with a Muslim scholar, and you talk about interfaith conversations, and and I may link that video into the description field of this conversation for other people to. I might even timestamp it to where you appear. You're there for about 10 minutes or so, I think. But
Yeah, it's at the 26-minute mark. Yeah.
yeah, so I might timestamp it to that for anyone in the audience that's curious. But yeah, it was an interesting conversation, and I want to get your hindsight or your retrospect on that engagement. And so, for context for the audience, there was a Muslim scholar and a student who was from I forget the name of the university, OUT or something. I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't remember the name.
He's also a regular at. His name's Mansour, and he's a
Uh-huh.
regular at Speaker's Corner in the UK. So
Okay, okay.
yes,
Seems like a
um,
highly esteemed and well-regarded scholar. And he
mm.
had a student of his with him who was very well put together. And then the host, I assume, is Muslim as well.
Yes,
Uh,
Eddie Dean. Eddie Dean
okay.
is his name.
And
It's called
some
the
people might
Dean
know.
Show. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So again, I may make that link available. I think again, to add context to this before we start talking about it, is that there was a clip that they played of a African American person of color in the United States wearing a police uniform who was basically just sort of issuing a bunch of anti-Semitic rhetoric. And a lot of it was straw manning. A lot of it was just the vitriol that you hear on the far right, and I have my criticisms of Islam, but I would never go to the gutter with it like this person did. So they were responding to that. And my criticisms, I believe, would be not as not well received as what that is. So it's like I would say this of any belief system or faith, that there is good faith and then there's faith that is, as you and I talked about, there's faith that's malappropriated for things. And they talked about that in this conversation. So they would not, I don't think, feel uncomfortable if I asked some critical questions of what happens in those instances. But anyway, this guy who was wearing a police uniform was just, it's reprehensible. I would never condone that type of behavior. So then you come on and you have some good faith to not necessarily issue a pun, but you had some good faith questions about their faith, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought you comported yourself well, and they were in kind reciprocating with you and giving their answers, to the best of their ability. So in kind of setting it up that way, I'll hand it over to you and get your reflection on that and what your takeaway was after that, because that was not that long ago. It was a few weeks ago, wasn't it?
No, yeah, it's in January. Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
think 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
With that, that one was actually interesting because I've got a mate from South Africa and this was sort of unheard of. A mate of mine had recently converted over to Islam, and my first sort of reaction to that was pull away, like don't talk to him because that's sort of what you're brought up to do. But then I thought to myself, well, first off, I have no reason to do that, and second off, I don't know why he converted. And I hadn't talked to him after he did that, like after he converted for at least a year. I did just stop talking to him. And that's bad on my front. So like I'll put it out there. But then I thought, you know what? Ring the guy up. Give him a ring. So I called him up and I said, hey mate, why did you convert over? And he went through that. He read the scriptures and he felt that he connected more with the Quran and everything. So, and he reads a lot. Like, so he's well read. And he lives in New Zealand now as well, but he's well read. So he reads anything he gets his hand on when it comes to faith, religion, and so on. So he'll read the yogis, everything. But the Quran made sense to him.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to him a bit further, but I was still confused. So I remembered all these Christian apologists always mentioned Eddie Dean. So I went on his show, on his Instagram, and I simply sent him a message, not thinking anything of it. And I send him a message. I go, hey, mate, I just want to ask some questions around Islam. It can be with you or anyone knowledgeable. I just want to ask some more. Mm-hmm. And then they got me on the show. I wasn't even expecting that. So they were very gracious. Really appreciate what they did there. But I wanted to make sure I actually had questions. So like I had 5 questions. I only got to ask 3 of them. And my first question was the attraction to Islam. So why would people be attracted to it? And Dr. Bilal, who's the scholar, he ended up pointing out that he used to be a Christian and he did kind of the same studies that my mate would have done to get to that idea. And so I was like, okay, that's fair enough. My wife actually said to me, she thinks it comes down to the conservative values of Islam. So they kind of have a clear direction of what's right and wrong. Where when you get Christianity, we're saved by grace through faith. So nothing of our own doing. So it's all God. He's the one that does the saving. So with it, and I don't want to be misrepresenting, but they know if I do this wrong, there can be a punishment. If I do this, there can be. And I'm not saying punish every case, but they know what sin is and what separates them. And so she felt that might be the attraction. These guys said it came from these studies, which I think both is valid reasons. Mm-hmm. But I had a lot of fun because these guys were so open to talk. And then the next one I asked was around the connection between the Quran and the Bible. Because there's this big thing that's going around known as the Islamic dilemma. And it comes down to the fact that it's suggested in the Quran that if you want to know more about the Quran, or if you're in doubt, go to the people of the book. So the people beforehand that has the Torah and the Injil. The Injil meaning the gospel. So evangelion, so gospel. And so what the Christians would say is if the Quran is correct, the Bible is true, and if the Bible is true, the Quran is false because they don't match up. So I wanted to understand where they might see it matching up. And so they sort of describe their point of view on it, but they do believe the Bible is a book that you can read, but with nuance in a sense. And then my next question came down to where's Muhammad in the Bible? Because so many people say Muhammad is in the Bible, and I always found that the references were quite like it was out there references, but I could understand why you might make that reference. Now, big reason for that, why I wanted to hop on this show and why I wanted to talk to them is because I felt many people strawman the arguments of Christians. So the last thing I wanted to do was strawman the argument of somebody else's faith. And for me, the best way to either reach or bridge a gap and be friends is to understand what that person actually believes, not what society tells you they believe. And so that started like actually pushing me into a direction, like it was my mate first, but asking all these questions. So I've spoken to a lot of people on Instagram, even with the differences within Christianity, like Catholics and Protestantism, Mormons and Christians. And so I even had a conversation like the Mormon guy, and he was very gracious to me. Hour and a half we had a conversation around LDS differences to Protestantism. And I felt that that's very valuable because first off, I didn't come with an agenda to try and convert someone, but rather to understand.
Right.
And if you come from that approach, you're less likely to strawman. And then, but what's even more nice about this show is they have reached out after the fact as well.
Oh.
So they said, we know you didn't get to ask all your questions. What's the rest?
Okay.
And so I send my questions in, and they actually got scholars to send back links and everything as to how to best answer those questions.
Okay.
And so you'll see that some people in the comment section weren't very gracious to the likes of Mansur and Dr. Bilal. They said they didn't answer my questions. Some people said that because it sounded like they had a few things, but they didn't know what my questions were going to be. They did do their due diligence to try and answer it afterwards. So I will put that out there. They've been fantastic.
Okay, wonderful.
And one of my final questions was around they generally speak about how the Quran is directly translated from Arabic, but Christian text is translated from Greek, and Jesus didn't speak Greek. Now, my answer to that was, well, first off, how do you know? And why is it an issue? And the reason I asked why it was an issue is because I speak 2 languages fluently. I can speak a third as well, and I can comprehend myself in both languages exactly the same. And I know there's slight nuances and so on, but I said, so what's the issue of it being written in Greek? Because Jesus would have most likely spoken to Pontius Pilate either in Latin or Greek. So why is it an issue? Because his first language might have been Aramaic, but he could have spoken Greek as well. So that was my question. Why is that an issue? And then they ended up saying that it's not actually an issue as the way I've put it out. It's more of the issue of transmission for them. So because it's Arabic to English, the transmission is directly from the original language. Because it's Greek, we have about 5,000 different manuscripts when it comes to the New Testament that's in Greek, Latin, Syriac, and even Aramaic and so on. And all those ones we believe is actually more of a suggestion why we believe in the New Testament is because we have so many things to verify the New Testament. They feel because of that, there's a lot of things that gets lost in translation. Which both is valid points, I think. So.
Yeah, but I see how you're saying it could be built into a straw man, because if there are multiple sources, and I agree with you, language is irrelevant to a degree, because, if you're a scholar and you're transcribing scroll after, from scroll to scroll, or however things are being radiated through time in terms of keeping documentation and so forth, that, you would have to have, just like you went from Greek to Latin or Latin to English, is there a fault in that something? Yes, there's nuance, there's context, there's things. But like you said, if there are multiple sources and multiple reference to draw from, that I don't think that's a case to nullify anything or certainly invalidate anything. It may be and this should be for scholars who have spent, years understanding all the subtlety, nuance, and context of all of this argument, to really split hairs and define where there may be apocryphal weakness, where there may be semantic or syntactic weakness, but again, that's not for the average person, especially somebody with an agenda who's an apologist for any other, like whether it's an atheist, apologist, which there are, or somebody who's really convicted with Islam who wants to sort of, tamp down, the value or the significance of those scriptures. And so, and let that not be visited upon them as well, right? That some Islamophobe is going to, and there are plenty of them, Sam Harris is a good example, Dawkins, these people are deeply Islamophobic, and they enjoy nothing more than misrepresenting and mischaracterizing Islam. And like I said earlier, I have criticisms, but they're good faith, and it's more to defend Islam than it is to refute or to tear apart. It's more like, again, where's that line of malappropriation? And they address that in that Dean show that you were on. They were talking about, the straw man that is made that, it's terrorism and all these other things. And it's like, no, that is not who we are, And yes, there's a bad PR that comes from that. But anyway, blah, blah. I don't want to get too in the weeds about my thoughts, but
no, but But like you're saying, that's my reason for the interfaith dialogue. So I don't want to straw man something. Now, I believe what I believe, and my
Right.
convictions is clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's very close to a Reformed Baptist conviction. I believe
Mm-hmm.
we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, by
Mm-hmm.
nothing that we have done, but everything He has done. So I'm fine with my conviction. So
Mm-hmm.
now if I actually want to love my brother as I love myself and love my neighbor as I love myself, I need to be gracious towards them. You see that Jesus himself takes the approach where he sits with tax collectors, he sits with the sinners of the day and the prostitutes and everything. And people were drawn to him because he loved them first. Now, he did point out to the sin and everything, but that was not what was important to him. What was important to them is, let them all come to me, follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And follow me in the sense of doing well to your fellow human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Loving God,
Mm-hmm.
but loving people as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to do. So in order for me to speak to my friend who's now converted over, but still love him because he is my brother in the sense that we are all created in the image and likeness of God. So because of that, I say, well, how can I speak to him? Is to actually understand where he's coming from. And I might not 100% understand, but I can empathize, I can get to it. And it's similar to my work in mental health. I empathize where those guys were coming from. Doesn't mean I have to agree, though.
Yeah.
And that's just across the board. But that's how we can help our fellow human beings. Like with you, I love your conversations. I've seen a few more of yours. And it's all about understanding where the person's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And then how does this add value to your viewers, to the people that's watching? And so for me, I think that's just amazing. And then to see those connections you've been able to make,
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't want to butcher the guy's name, but he's recently gone on the Alex O'Connor show. But you were privileged to, I think it's Cash Strap is the guy's
Oh,
name.
Bernardo. Yeah. Yeah. Neat
Yeah,
guy. Yeah. Neat guy.
yeah. But just to see a guy like him, like your guys' conversation was very intriguing. But then he hops onto Alex O'Connor's show as well, and they have this conversation, and I'm like, what amazing connections you've been able to make simply because you're asking questions.
Right.
And that's what
Right.
I want to do. I want to ask questions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, you and I are absolutely aligned on that. That I think because when we're busy asking questions and then using those questions only to formulate better questions, that it relieves us of this friction or attachment to rigidity. And I say that in acknowledging the strength of faith and the strength of one's conviction to their faith. It's not about that. It's more that you hold that, but then you also take that with you into inquiry. And so your perspectival awareness is inalterable, it's inviolate, but you can still be that curious soul that wants to ask more questions so that you better understand. And I think that's reciprocating and more enriching in one's faith. If you are devout in a faith, this will not tarnish that faith. This will not, I don't think, there are people who could probably interpret it differently, but I think to know more, right? And we talked about this in our pre-made. It's like the logos, the word,
Yeah.
if it is in good faith, if it is in true, good, and beautiful, or, the logos, the nous, and the psyche, the Holy Spirit, God, Christ, the Holy Trinity, these triads that glue us and anchor us to commitment, like you said, to being with your brother and your sister and in fellowship or community with them. And if we can do that, if we can focus on that rather than the tyranny of divisiveness, then that's a wonderful way to comport ourselves, I think, through any faith,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
But
and I
it's
appreciate that.
finding those bridging areas, like bridging those gaps. It's in the end, we're all human beings, so it's actually pretty easy to bridge gaps. It's are you willing to still have a conversation with someone you wholeheartedly disagree with, and be able to have a nice conversation and even a coffee with them afterwards?
Right.
And so for me, I like the joke that I heard Alex O'Connor made when Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins were doing their talk with him, and he said we said that we won't talk religion or politics at our dinner.
Uh-huh.
And then he said, so we had 2 hours of silence apart from when Jordan Peterson said to the waiter, well, what do you mean by order? So
Oh my God.
for me, like, even in that, like, first off, they made a joke over the whole situation. But you hear that the fact is, Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson, after disagreeing majorly with one another, and Alex O'Connor sitting there, they still went out to dinner together. They still sat there. They still had a good time together, and
Isn't that great?
that's what I like, like I
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, because not to go too deep in the weeds with philosophy, to me, argumentation isn't about winning. It's about enriching the proposition or the idea or the tension. It's enriching that space so both people walk away enriched, right? And so there's no win or lose. It's that, and that can enrich your own commitment to your values and your beliefs about your relationship with whatever, however you want to take that, out. So Peterson, hopefully felt enriched by that, entering into tension with Dawkins. And, and Dawkins is a brilliant man. I love to criticize him, but he's a brilliant man. And so that they were able to have that, I'll have to watch it to judge what, the value of the conversation, but that I would intuit, because I've seen both of them in different instances engage. And, so hopefully it bore fruit for both of them, and they were affected, by that. And I know Dawkins has checked in with people, who I've listened to, who say, he'll say, am I crazy about this? Am I wrong? Or, am I approaching this right? And he's checking in with people, and I appreciate that. Again, I love to criticize him, but if that's, and I only love to criticize him because I think, as you said, he strawmans the hell out of things, and it's like, stop,
Yeah.
or he nitpicks. It's like, that's not what faith is. That's not what, one's, lure to the attraction of the divine. You don't get it, Richard. You don't get it. You're trying to argue biology against something that has nothing to do with that intellectual pursuit. You know what I mean? It's not the same room. It's not the same building. And there's something called non-overlapping magisteria, and there's other debates about that, but it's a nice thought that science can exist and faith can exist, and they don't need to soil each other, and but there are arguments where they can inform each other, and so but just that gentle proposition that you can be a scientist and a person of faith, or you can be a person of faith that doesn't reject science, or whatever the combination is. So anyway, but yeah.
Well, even with my studies, so I've got a theology degree, but I also have a study. I also got my nursing background, diploma in nursing, and the diploma in nursing is science, it's biology, it's all those things. So I don't put that to the side. That's my bread and butter. That's my job, So, but it's because of my faith that when I look at biology, I see the intricacies of it and I see the beauty of it. Now, I'm not saying someone that doesn't have faith can't see the beauty of it. Of course not. That's not
right.
But I'm saying that's one of my drivers.
Yeah.
And so I look at it and I just look at the amazement of it. When I look at my children and I see them running around and how they grow up and everything, I'm just like, who's this little human going to be? Look at this amazing little human being. So three daughters, and each one is so different. You kind of think, like when you got the first one and you had your late nights and you know how to calm her. Now the second one comes by and you're just like, oh, well, it's going to be a bit easier. No, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And now with the third one, only 3 months old, it's just like a whole nother kettle of fish,
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, you got your hands full. Yeah. And you will continue to have your hands full. Yeah.
And I'm also one of those that now with 3 children, I'm like, Spoken to my wife, of course, but we're like, what about number four? You know, like we're not opposed to the idea because we're loving these stages while hating it at the same time.
Right,
So,
right, which you're fully entitled to, right? Yeah.
yeah,
It is a fire you walk through, I'm sure, but
yeah.
the love that you feel in that, that
Mm.
overrides everything, I'm sure. Yeah, that paternal love. That's what keeps you coming back for for
Yeah,
more diapers, more accidents, more crying, whatever. Temper tantrums.
but looking at my children, that just leads me to my another part of what I do is I look at them, look at the beauty of life. And why I went into aged care, one was a financial situation, but the next one was I didn't want to keep working in the mental health sphere. So I
Hmm.
actually moved into aged care. And you have people that sort of at the end of their life.
Hmm.
And you actually get an opportunity. It's not a right or anything, but you get an opportunity to see a person at the end of their life and actually add value to that. I don't know whether I sent you the link on my talk on euthanasia, but
No, I don't think so.
I did a full talk on euthanasia because our church runs things called equip classes where we talk about Christian ethics. And
Hmm.
so I did a 30-minute talk on euthanasia. And the focus was why would people choose euthanasia, but also what's the Christian perspective on it.
Hmm.
And so the biggest reason why people choose is lack of value in their life.
Hmm.
They don't feel like they have value to give or still receiving value. So what I wanted to do with my talk was going and working in aged care is add value to these
Hmm.
people's lives
Okay.
and have that opportunity to see whether you could sit down and not to try and change their choice in any which way, but to actually show that even at the end of someone's life, they have so much value to give and they have perspective, they have learnings. And to give a person an opportunity to share their perspective and learnings can actually help our generation out so much more. And but that takes just giving that time. And when I started a new job, there was one guy that really wanted to meet me, one of my residents. And the one person, the unit manager, the nurse unit manager said to me, make sure you've got 45 minutes, Emil, when you go to talk to him,
Hmm.
because he likes to talk.
Okay.
But I sat with it. So I made space and I went and sat with him. And he did speak for 45 minutes, but he had so much richness to add.
Mm.
And so it
Mm.
was so beautiful because he's talking about how much he loved his wife, but when she passed away, that his daughter became such a big part of his life and was there for him whenever she could be. And then he says how they have such a good relationship where he can call her most nights and they talk deep and meaningful stuff.
Okay.
And then all the work that he has done in the past. So that's what I love about aged care is to be able to see the value that a person in that age can add to a person like myself.
Yep.
Simply if I give them the opportunity to listen.
Mm. Mm. Emil, it's funny you're saying this, and I'm glad you're saying this as part of this conversation. But I mentioned that I had somebody else prior to our call, and she wrote a book called Thoughtful Aging. And
Oh
she and
yeah.
I, yeah, so she and I talked for an hour. In fact, if I in upload world and YouTube world, she'll be the conversation that comes up before ours is published. And we talked about a lot of this, wherein cross generationally we can inform each other, support each other, uh, reciprocally open and care for each other in ways that are subtle beyond direct action. And it's so true. In fact, we referenced elder care and kinder care in the same facility, wherein you have memory care people, persons in what we would call convalescence or aging, and also toddlers and children, and the way that they can reciprocally attend to each other and enrich each other, you know. And she and I both admitted that as children we loved speaking to elders and learn and just
Mhm.
wicking out like you said a moment ago, wicking out these insights and these stories that they share, which is just it's a precious gift to get that from them.
And for me, that it brings me back to my conversations with my grandfather. Same name, Emil Pienaar, so I was named after him. But him and I would have late nights talking about theology, talking about all these different things. And I used to ring him all the time while I was studying my degree in theology, and I'd be like, Opie, I learned this and this and this. And then he sits there and he just listens to me. And then he brings his perspective. And when I graduated, because he never had the opportunity to go to university himself. So when he graduated, I knew he had a theological background himself, just self-study. And I invited him to my graduation, but I held the certificate while he holds it as well.
Oh,
and
cool.
I put my arm around him because I said we graduated together.
Oh, what
And
a lovely gift.
I made a photocopy of it and I put it in, before he died, I put it in this nursing home just to be up there. And so I said, you're welcome to tell anybody that you graduated, because I talked to him about my assignments. I talked to him about everything. He told me where to go search up books and everything. And even though people say, oh, you could just Google it, how much more rich is it hearing it from your grandfather?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
that's what I want to facilitate with these other people in aged care. We have kids actually come and visit the aged care facility as well.
Nice.
And then they'll do like a little show and they'll give stuff to the families. For me, that's just beautiful. So,
It is. Oh, it's so
yeah.
enriching for everyone. Everyone benefits from that, and I think that's beautiful. And here's some more of that too. So, Emil, we've been talking for about an hour and 15 to 20 minutes, and I hate to confess my frailty, but I am older and will be needing my sleep soon. But what I will do is, rather than just saying, "Hey, let's just stop," let's bring it in for a landing. Is there a parting thought? Is there something that you want to sum up from the conversation that we've had? How would you like to close this out and give it that grace that it's just top off, little cherry on the top of this otherwise beautiful conversation that we had?
I think I said this one in our pre-meet and greet, but what I like about conversations about just about anything is the questions that get asked. There's the saying, do not judge a man on the answers he gives, but rather the questions that he asks. Mm-hmm. And for me, I've really enjoyed this because of the questions you ask, but we're asking through our conversation as well. Mm-hmm. It's because it shows that we're both learning people that wants to learn more, even about each other, but about society, about life just in general. And what I would say is, let's not stop asking questions. Let's keep asking questions. And my final thought is John C. Maxwell. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a leadership guru. But he said before he dies, he wants to ask one last question, because on his deathbed, he still wants to be learning. And
good for him.
Yeah, so for me, I want to have that approach that I'm still learning something new every day. I'm learning something for the first time every day. And so that's my final thought when it comes to interfaith dialogues, when it comes to mental health and addictions, when it comes to just life in general, is keep asking questions.
I couldn't agree more. There's so much to that. There's such a power to that. And I think, I won't even preach about it. It's just like, if you can move into that discipline and that the appreciation that comes from that, and it's okay to know, it's okay to believe, but the power of inquiry and the development of inquiry, that it's just one question to the next, and that you're building something there, and you deposit what the gold that's brought from the ore, whatever metaphor. But yeah, just that. So amen. I agree. That's a good thing to pass on to anyone who who might need to hear it. So, but I've enjoyed this conversation, Emil, and I appreciate you for being here and engaging with me and having a conversation. And to the YouTube audience, I'll say goodbye to you after we stop the record. But to the YouTube audience, I hope this was a fulfilling conversation for you as well. And I will bid you adios for now. And hopefully, like I said, there's some good takeaways for you in this conversation. So, Emil, like I said, I'll say goodbye to you once we stop the record here. So let me go ahead and do that. Bye, YouTube.